this kind lady out in Harwinton decided to, that she didn't think that this joke was a very good joke. So she wrote her letter to WTIC, "Dear Sir, a joke which Bob Steele told one morning recently has undoubtedly influenced, erroneously, more than one individual. It was this: a bum asked a man for a quarter for something to eat. The man offered to buy him a drink, wherein the bum said he didn't indulge. He then offered to buy him a pack of cigarettes. He declined again, saying he didn't smoke. That he was hungry and needed something to eat. Whereupon the man said to the bum, 'Well, first come on home with me. I want my wife to see what happens to a fellow who neither drinks nor smokes.'" There was also mention made about playing the horses, along with these other things. For all the good Bob tries to pour into his program, he is building up a type of respect in the thoughts of his listeners. Then when he comes out supporting as humor a joke of that caliber, it divides his listening audience into two categories. One, a group who enjoys hearing that these, our vices, are the rule rather than the exception. Two, a group so utterly disgusted with this brand of humor that they refuse to invite him into their homes any longer. Of course, I suppose there is a rare, indecipherable word, who might consider him funny. Frankly, I think he is on the coarse side. For all his knowledgeable, quote-unquote, refinements of the English language, another indecipherable word. For a program of that duration each day, can't we expect and demand better qualities in an individual, a higher caliber, so as to influence for good so wide a listening audience? For a man in your position, can you afford to do less? You're not here, are you? Lois Humphrey of Harwinton? Yeah, you know, if you were here, I probably should have asked that before, in case you never know. But of course, who do you think wrote back to this lady from Harwinton? Whose job was that at the time? Of course.
Sir, back yes.
No, I mean, probably many of you thought you should have had, right? Patricelli wrote back. "Dear Mrs. Humphrey, yours is a challenging letter and a thoughtful one. Bob Steele does pour much good into his program, much that is born of logic and earthiness. And with it all goes his innate sense of humor, the single quality which makes for the Steele image and personality. Essentially, and this I can vouch for, Steele is a sensitive and sentimental man. He would not knowingly hurt any person by word or deed. In fact, his quiet deeds for good outside of his work are legion. Over a 4-hour period daily, Monday through Saturday, Steele brings to his work a dedication and sincerity which has earned for him and this station the respect of hundreds of thousands of listeners. Wedded to these qualities is the ability to see life through good-natured lenses. I asked Steele what he thought of your letter and its comments. He read it carefully and then said, 'You know, I think she has a point. If I thought that story would have been offensive, I would not have used it.' Incidentally, Bob is an admirer of penmanship and of those who have the ability to express themselves clearly. He was quite taken with both of these abilities in your letter. Would that we had more Bob Steeles on the radio stations of our country. They do, of course, like all of us, fault occasionally. But over the long haul, they perform splendidly for the good of the community and our traditional American ideals. I thank you, Mrs. Humphrey, for your letter. As Bob Steele's superior in employment only, I feel somewhat like the father whose son's marks in school have occasioned a letter of reprimand. We accept your letter in the spirit in which it was written. We'll work faithfully to correct and improve, but remain proud of our Bob. Sincerely yours. I don't know if today anyone at any station would take the time to write a letter like Patricelli wrote to this woman. Just a wonderful, wonderful piece of writing and comment. I tried, when I put all this material together, I tried it. My first thought was that it'll tell the story all by itself. I don't need to say a word. But of course, you begin to say, well, I've got to at least identify the person in that photo, because not everybody will know if that's Dick Bertel or whoever. And so, but it grew and grew and grew, and so more and more things that I kept. And these pages I just wrote. Mrs. Humphrey's letter to WTIC has to be the irony of ironies, but illustrates the pressures on any entertainer with a wide audience. Mrs. Humphrey apparently wasn't aware of the gutter humor from other 1960s radio personalities like Don Imus. She also fails to see that Bob's joke is really premised on the bum's inherent dignity and the husband's risibility, thus conveying a message the opposite of her impression. Although it probably didn't address Mrs. Humphrey's concern, when he repeated the joke again some years later, Bob changed bum to panhandler. Patricelli's masterful diplomacy in reply also says something about Bob's long tenure at WTIC, and may show why his respect for Pat and Morency was a crucial part of his success. So I would stand up here forever if you let me, I'm afraid. But be doing some slideshows at many libraries throughout the state. If you hear about any of them, I hope you'll come along. And if you can convince your local library to purchase one of these collections, they're offered, the $35 per volume is the printing cost alone. All the money I spend on a professional graphic artist and other costs, about $25,000, all of that is not reflected in this price. That's just my love of doing all of this. But for the printing cost alone, your library can add this to their collection, and they're fun to read, especially for people who are there. So thank you.
Phil has volumes with him, and we're going to be here until 4 o'clock. I hope you can stay and examine them if Phil can be with us at that time. Now, we've gone out of alphabetical sequence, and if we had stayed on that sequence, we would be close to the S letter for steel. But preceding that would be the R letter for rice. And if he wends his way up here to the microphone, I want to just mention to those who didn't have the pleasure and the fun of working with Ray Rice, he was one of our heroes because he went to work for the radio station that other radio people listened to. WNEW 1130 in New York, and then on to a little place called NBC. But to give you the update on where he's been since his days at TIC, here he is in person, the incomparable Ray Rice.
Hello, everyone. I'm pleased that he asked me to come out early so I wouldn't go through that awkward period where you start from the back of the room and the applause peters out before you get up there and you're kind of walking along hoping you're not going to stumble and all of that. I am a very lucky fellow. I'm going to put this on. Hope it doesn't clump here. Is that okay? Good. Very lucky fellow because I scratched my way through a series of little penny whistle radio stations and was working at a station called WACE in Chicopee Falls, Massachusetts, when I was fortunate enough to come down to the broadcast house. And it was like stepping into another world. I came from a radio station where I was news director, program director, newscaster, and DJ all at once. And our newsroom was a little closet with a United Press machine, and that was it. But then to come to broadcast house and have engineers who actually spun the records, and there was somebody who scripted something for you, And we went to a TV booth, and every half hour said, Channel 3, and like, I mean, and then went up to FM and did Music of the Masters, and went over to AM and read something else, and did a TV newscast and a radio newscast, and all of that. It was overwhelming. But that prepared me for what was coming next in my life. And WTIC, seeing you all, hearing the stories, kind of brings back all these shadows of once past and just brings it all to life. What a wonderful time. And I met some wonderful, wonderful people in all that time. And when I first got here this afternoon, I saw Norm Peters standing outside. And of course, I mentioned outside that on a stage in life, I had to rush to the men's room, so I couldn't say hello. But we came. I remember Norm very well. And another fellow we used to work with was Franz Laubert, who's no longer here. And I have so many memories. I can remember sitting in the booth with Franz and Norm, and Franz Laubert had a Luger that he pulled out. He's clicking this thing. My goodness sake! Here we are on an audio booth, you know. Dick Bertel. I can remember. Well, you know, the TIC was the place. I was there between '62 and '67, and it was a place where I met people who had the hair part in the middle and the slick down and thin mustache, like they stepped out of a 1936 Vogue magazine. And I would walk down the hall and I'd see Dick Bertel, and I would do what all the old radio announcers did. And I'd say, "Hello." And we'd do that. And you know, breaking people up was always a lot of fun. It kind of empowered me, and it kind of made me feel a little more comfortable because, quite frankly, I was terribly intimidated by Bob Steele and Gene Colbert. Or should have been Colbert, I guess, but Gene Colbert and all of that. And all of this just coming from a small station was just incredible. So I did start to joke around, and of course Arnold Dane was one of my favorites. I could, you know, we had this FM booth in the corner, if you remember, old broadcast house where you'd go in and had all the records, it was all scripted. And the tours would come by, and they'd come by and they'd look, and this is this studio, and they'd come by, and periodically they'd come by and stand in front of you, and if you were in there doing FM, you'd turn and go like this. Like you were a fish, because you really felt like you were in a fishbowl. But I can remember walking down the hall, and I'd look over and I'd see Arnold Dane would be in there doing his FM, and I didn't want to look at him, because for some reason, and everybody has somebody who would just break them up, just look at him. So I'd walk by the booth and I'd look the other way. And I know he told me later, he said, "Ray," he said, "I know if you didn't look at me, I'd be okay." And I'd walk past, and I know he was relieved. But I would come back, and I'd look around the corner and just come in. And he'd turn, and I'd go. Well, I tell you, we had more fun. What a wonderful guy.